And shamanism is something that, even myself, backstory into this is that a while ago, my sister was like, hey, let's take this shaman course, like a 6-week thing. And so we took it, and I went to like a few of them, and I didn't fully understand what was going on or what I was experiencing or anything like that. I was just there because it was like, okay, this is a cool thing to do. And then coming back from that, there was like a lot of, after I like talked about it, I was like, yeah, I'm learning about this. I had a lot of people that were like, that's not really against, like, that's against our religion. And it's like going outside of your religion to another religion. And I was like, I don't think that that's really what it was. Like, it wasn't anything that had to do with that. But there's so much stigma in that space. But it's
Oh,
funny
so
because
much.
I was introduced to it, and then it kind of just dropped off. And then, as I said in my story, during a really dark time in my life, Candace reached out to me after we had a session together, and we knew we would work together at some point, but not sure how that would work out.
Mhm.
And you're like, hey, I'm taking students. And I just jumped back into that. So it's almost like it's come a couple of times for me to really integrate it into my space. And it hasn't taken away, it's just added. And that's what shamanism also is. It's not a religion,
Mm-mm.
it's a lifestyle, it's teachings, it's ancient wisdom, it's healing that can benefit you
Yes.
along with whatever spiritual practice you want to pursue.
Yes, it's a healing path.
It's a beauty way.
And yes, it's the beauty way. It's a way of living your life, a way of perceiving life. And there's, of course, lots of tools that come along with shamanism. So it's not just a philosophy, even though there's a lot of philosophy that's in shamanism, there's actual practical tools to help yourself heal, help others heal, heal your community, heal your planet. So that's what I love about it so much because I studied metaphysical teachings for many, many years. But it's when I came to shamanism, I was like, oh, this is good stuff.
This is the bread and butter.
This is the bread and butter because not only was it changed my perspectives and healed me, but it permanently changed my life. Like I was seeing tangible changes in my life and in my body and in my relationships. And that is what it's all about because it's like people can say whatever they want, but if it doesn't create permanent change for the better in your life, and like we talked about in the last show, we were talking about the tree of life, you can always tell where someone is by their fruits. Like what kind of fruits are they creating? How are their relationships? What is their environment? Are they at peace? And I felt like when I came to the path of shamanism, it helped me create a fruitful life.
Mm-hmm.
And I became so much happier. Like there used to be such a longing and sadness in my heart. For many years, I struggled with depression and it was gone and it hasn't come back. It's so I would never stand behind something that I didn't know to be true for myself. I would be living inauthentically and out of my integrity. That is not the person that I am. That's not the person I choose to be in this life. I want to live a life of integrity. And so this is why this worked for me so much because I can only try it and I did it for myself and I trained with an Econ shaman for a couple of years and then I started using the tools to help others and I'm seeing all this change,
Yeah.
in my life and the people around me. And so I just feel so blessed. And I think it's so funny because spirit does that, right? Like your story, you're like, it came around again and again. Spirit will always repeat things that need to come into your life, at least a couple of times, 3 times. I always talk about the magic number of 3,
Mm-hmm.
but they'll repeat it. They'll say, you need to look into this. It's like the spirit will give you these nudges, you know?
Absolutely. And I think along with that is upholding the respect as to where it came from, is that ancient healing
Yes.
wisdom. Is a lot of times there's also this space of like, oh, but you're not Native American, how can you be practicing these practices?
Right, which is
And
a huge misconception because it actually
yes,
originates from Siberia, from the Tungus people of Siberia thousands of years ago. Shamanism has been around as long as people.
yes.
It's old, old, old. And it's those earth-based wisdom teachings that you're talking about.
Yeah, and throughout we talked about this in our last podcast too, but throughout records in all different places in the world, there was ruins, there was hieroglyphics, all of this information, or even people who were buried and they found those burial sites and they might have had a cloak on, or they had different things that were very symbolic that in the past shamans used for their rituals. They were found in those things. They would find these bodies and they'd have all this stuff there. And knowing that is like there is that wisdom that's rooted everywhere throughout the world
All over the world.
without having any form of communication. So that just
Mhm.
shows also the power that comes within it. And I feel like it's so important that we do honor and respect where it did come from, because there were people who lost their lives in honoring and upholding all of these traditions. And
So true.
so we keep this in a form of respect because it has been such a healing journey for us as well as for other people. But we also know that a lot of people sacrifice a lot to keep it pure and to keep it honest. And so I feel like that's something that we also do uphold. And one thing that you've definitely taught me, Candace, is especially when it comes to ceremonies or like fire ceremonies or different things, is following the tradition of how it came.
Yes.
It might be easier to do it a different way, but when
Out
we
of
follow
respect to
the
your
respect,
ancestors. Yes.
it brings more power as well. It's so much more fulfilling and the energy of it is so palpable. And so holding
Mhm.
honor and respect for the ancient wisdom is definitely something that we think is extremely important and is something that we keep on the forefront of our mind often as well.
Yes. So we just addressed two major issues, right? Because first of all, shamanism is not a religion
Mm-hmm.
and it's not just a philosophy, it's a healing path. The other thing is that shamanism is not Native American, exclusively Native American. Shamanism has been around since the beginning of time, since for as long as people have been here. And the word shamanism actually comes from Siberia, from the Tungus people of Siberia. And so this is even that term. And yet there's so many misconceptions. You're like, shamanism is Native American.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, there's different shamanic paths and they are based off, there are certain traditions that come from that place in the world that were infused into that shamanic path. So like I was trained in Incan shamanism, and I've always had a passion for Native American shamanism. So I usually blend the two of Incan and Native American shamanism. But you could be a Nordic shaman. You can be anywhere all over the world. And also, to even with a Native American shamanism, there's some things that are interesting that are across the board. Like you were saying, like there's certain teachings that these people from all over the world that say are the same, which is really wild because you're like, how do these people hang out and talk? And how did this person all the way from Siberia talk to the person here in the Americas or in, Peru? But truth is truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there is some variance depending on your culture and your location. And this is one of the things that we talked about when we were talking about creating sacred space, because sometimes they'll flip the elements, with West and South, depending on with the Native American traditions, depending on where you're at. Like where were you at geographically? Were you in Peru in South America? Were you up here, you know, from the Sioux Nation, or were you from the Choctaw? It just depends on your geographical location. But the basic principles are the same. And they're all earth-based. They're all very connected to Mother Earth and the fact that she is in a consciousness, she's alive. And having that respect for her is central to shamanism. And you look at what are the number one killers for people these days? It's heart attack, stroke, okay? Cancer. There's been this deep disconnect to Mother Earth. And because of that, that's also our connection to our bodies, because our bodies represent Mother Earth. They represent the earth in which we live in. And when you don't have this respect and love, you mistreat it. You don't put the proper things into your body. You don't recognize your connection between yourself and Mother Nature and Earth or creation itself. And when you do this energetically, emotionally, spiritually, and it will eventually manifest into the physical body. This is the way that energy medicine works, because we work on an energetic level. And this is what shamans do. They work on an energetic level. And those energies manifest into reality. And so it's so interesting, right? It's like you look at our number one killers, it's like we're being called to remembrance. We're being called back to some of the old ways, because we need to remember that not only are we eternal spirits, but there's also consciousness within everything that's around us. Thank you for watching Modern Sages. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
We are so grateful for your support. We have an Instagram account as well as on Facebook. We have our podcast, which is the Modern Sages podcast.
And we are so excited to launch our Gifts of Spirit classes in our Modern Sages Mystery School.
Absolutely. Oh, we're so excited. So we're going to link the information below in the show notes for more information about our mystery school.